Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th. You're listening to WSKB 89.5 FM radio for the Westfield masses. My name is Tina Gorman. I'm your Wake Up Wednesday host, and we are broadcasting live this morning from Studio 120 over at Westfield Technical Academy. Behind the boards and behind the glass, because I can only see his hand when he waves it, is the chairman of the board, producer Pete Coles. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning.
How you doing back there?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Not too bad.
I feel like I'm in my little booth over here because I got the door closed too today.
Oh yeah, you are in your. Yes, I know. I closed the door too because I realized when we've broadcast here before, sometimes it's a little noisy out in the halls. So
well, and they're doing shop cleanup this week.
They're doing cleaning.
So shop cleanup all week long. So
Yep.
It's going to be little noisy.
Little noisy, but
yes.
but very clean.
Yes.
So we're looking forward to that. We have a special show planned this morning, but until my guest gets here, I'm not going to tell you what that special show is all about. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Don't give it away, Pete. Okay, so we are rounding out the month of June, heading toward July. I do need to remind folks that just as a reminder, next week when it is the 4th of July, no fireworks in Westfield for the 4th of July. We did them for the 350th celebration. And I have to say, Pete, in my opinion, those fireworks were so spectacular that I think that, that covered us that covered Westfield probably like for the next 5 years. Because
well, don't say that to the people because they'll get upset.
I know. I'm just teasing, but they just were spectacular.
They were good this year. They were good this
really
year,
terrific. And, luckily there are lots of fireworks going on in the area. So I know people are a little disappointed that we won't have them in Westfield on the 4th, but certainly the surrounding communities will. So you'll have plenty of opportunities for that.
But we have on the 4th of July?
What do we have on the 4th of July?
A couple of nice parades.
Oh, that's right. We do. Do we have the does Hampton
Ponds is in the morning.
Okay.
And then Wyben is in the afternoon at 5 o'clock.
Perfect.
So I'll be DJing in the Hampton Ponds Parade again this year.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I know they've done a couple of announcements at the city council meetings to invite the councilors who would like to participate in that.
Yeah, we usually get a few.
Which I think is great. Yeah, and somebody was saying, one of the councilors, I can't remember which one, or I read it in the minutes, that those sort of old-fashioned neighborhood parades have, kind of gone by the wayside. So it's nice that Westfield has two neighborhood groups that do those kinds of things on the 4th of July.
Yeah, like on America's Hometown Parade.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I think that's terrific.
It is.
All right, so let's start out with a few birthdays. So today, June 26th, we'll start with the singer Billy Davis Jr. He was born June 26, 1938, in St. Louis, Missouri. He is 81 years old today. He was a founding member of the popular 1960s vocal group The Fifth Dimension. Billy Davis Jr. has continued to attract attention as a soloist and a duo partner with his wife, Marilyn McCoo. That I did not know. I didn't realize.
And their anniversary is in about a month.
Really?
45th, either 40 or 50 years.
Okay. Pete, there has to be a reason why you would know that trivia. Because I didn't even realize that Billy Davis Jr. and Marilyn McCoo were married.
Michael Buster McMahon talked about it in his show on Monday.
Oh, he did. I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God, Pete, you're blowing me right out of the water here with your trivia.
No, I was paying attention to Michael's show on Monday.
Excellent. Well, Billy Davis Jr. formed a band, the Kingsmen, while he was serving in the United States Army. Moving to Los Angeles following his honorable discharge, Davis hoped to interest a record label in signing him to a solo contract. Instead, he joined with Ron Townsend and Lamont McLemore to form a band called the Versatiles that soon expanded with the addition of vocalists Marilyn McCoo and Florence LaRue. How do you like that? McCoo and LaRue.
Holy cow, it's a lot of pronunciation.
It is. It is a whole lot. In 1965, they changed their name to the Fifth Dimension at the suggestion of producer Johnny Rivers. Leaving the group in 1975, Davis and McCoo, who had married in 1969, so there's that anniversary, Pete, embarked on a career as a duo. Their second single, You Don't Have to Be a Star to Be in My Show, reached the top chart position and culminated with Davis and McCoo receiving a Grammy for Best R&B Performance by a Group or Duo.
And that was the song that Michael played in his show.
Did he? Yeah. Yep. I decided not to do that one only because it's probably not my favorite, and there were a lot of great songs that the Fifth Dimension sang, so I decided to go with one of the other ones. But happy 81st birthday to Billy Davis Jr. It's so amazing to me that these people are now like in their 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't think of them that way.
Right.
You think of, okay, the fifth dimension, they're all still in their 20s and 30s. But no. Okay, it's also the birthday, June 26, 1961, born in Baldwin Hill, California, singer Terry Nunn. She's 58 years old. You might not recognize the name, but Terry Nunn joined the group Berlin in 1979 after the departure of the Los Angeles band's original vocalist. Nunn's good looks and British-sounding vocals helped Berlin create a cult following on MTV, especially with the music videos for The Metro and No More Words. In 1986, Berlin topped pop radio with the ballad Take My Breath Away from the Top Gun soundtrack.
Absolutely.
Now, in my house, like Top Gun is one of the all-time, top-rated movies. We've seen it at least 1,000 times. So, we have the lines memorized, the songs memorized, everything. But you'll recognize that song, Take My Breath Away. If you're not getting the title, you'll recognize it from the movie. Unfortunately, a year after that song came out, the band split up. And after a lengthy hiatus from music, Terry Nunn recruited new musicians to resurrect Berlin in the late 1990s. In 2000, they released Berlin Live, Sacred and Profane. True to Nunn's rebellious spirit, the album cover, which depicts a woman breastfeeding her child, caused some controversy with the record label. So Terry Nunn, I guess, kind of a little bit of a rebellious streak there, but great singer, great song. So we will listen to Take My Breath Away later on. June 26th is also the birthday of Derek Jeter. He was born in Pequannock, New Jersey, not far from where I went to high school, actually.
Cool.
And I did not realize that Derek Jeter was from Pequannock, New Jersey. He's 45 years old today. Lanky and athletic, Derek Jeter was talented enough to play basketball in high school, but he was determined to become a Major League Baseball player, specifically the starting shortstop for the New York Yankees. He batted over .500 in his final 2 years of high school baseball, striking out just once as a senior. Derek Jeter won several national sports awards, including being named the American High School Coaches Association's 1992 High School Player of the Year, the 1992 Gatorade High School Athlete of the Year, and the USA Today's High School Player of the Year. Think he was talented? Derek Jeter was drafted by the Yankees in 1992. During 1996, his first full season in the majors, his performance helped the Yankees win the World Series against the Braves. Since then, he's seen 4 more Yankees World Series wins in 1998, 1999, 2000, and 2009. Jeter is the all-time Yankees hit leader and was named team captain in 2003. When he officially retired in 2014, he ranked 6th in Major League Baseball history with 3,465 hits. So happy 45th birthday to baseball player Derek Jeter.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And then this last one I threw in as just here, you can tuck this away in your trivia brain over there, Pete. It is the birthday of the late Zen Jinlian. She is the tallest woman on record.
Okay.
She was born June 26, 1964 in Hunan, China. She died on February 13th, 1982 at the age of 17. She was very young when she died. Zhang Jinlian was the tallest modernly verified female person. When she was 4 years old, she was 5 foot 1.5 inches tall. At the age of 13, she was 7 foot 1.5 inches tall. When she turned 16, she was 7 foot 10.5 inches tall. And at the age of 17, she was 8 foot 1 3/4 inches tall. She weighed 305 pounds, but she suffered from both scoliosis as well as diabetes. And when I looked this one up online, it looks like generally people who are very, very tall don't, their lifespan is relatively short. Although,
well, it used to be.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
Like Andre the Giant, didn't last very long. Maybe into his 50s. Manute Bowles had all kinds of health problems.
Yeah.
The guy there's another guy from China that's really tall.
Yes, there was another guy. Yeah. I mean, there were several if you look them up. So interesting, it's sort of an interesting fact. Kind of sad. But anyway, so happy birthday to the late Zhang Jinlian.
Gotcha.
All right, where am I? I still have time. So I'm going to make the announcement that June...
Sorry, I was helping a student. I got a student
That's
looking at
okay.
a camera in here
Okay.
for me for the World Series. He's trying to unbrick it.
Okay,
And
very
I'm
good.
giving him a project for the final week, and he's all psyched because he's like, I don't have to clean.
There you go. Oh, there you go. Oh, he's loving that, Pete.
Yes.
All right, June 26th is National Coconut Day. Now, I love coconut. Love coconut. And
Okay.
now I know that it has all kinds of health benefits. So summer starts in earnest on June 26th when National Coconut Day arrives. The coconut offers sweet support for our bodies in several ways. Coconut oil alone falls into the superfood category because of its medium chain triglyceride, or MCT's, content and all that they seem to do. Whether supporting a weight loss program, moisturizing skin and hair, or metabolizing into energy, coconut oil plays a significant role for your body. We use the whole coconut in many different forms for our body and everyday cooking. From shredded coconut to coconut milk, cream, water, and oil, each provides essential nutrients and flavor. Its antiviral and antimicrobial properties are notable as well. Coconut is rich in fiber, vitamin B6, iron, and minerals like magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, selenium, and zinc. The oil from coconut moisturizes our skin and also helps keep our skin clear and our hair silky. Of course, in the kitchen, beyond baked goods, coconut infuses sweet flavor to our cooking, and because the MCTs in coconut oil don't absorb in the body as fat, it is an ideal alternative to other oils and fats. The flavor of coconut oil makes the best air-popped popcorn. Those who are
That's true.
Yep, and how about this one? Those who are lactose intolerant and craving ice cream know that coconut milk also makes an excellent substitute for creamy homemade ice cream. And of course, it's not summer without a pina colada. So beyond the fruit and water of the coconut that we consume, the husk and shells are used as a potting medium, carbon filtration, carbon, biofuel, and even organic cat litter. So lots of uses for coconut. The husks are also used to make coir, which is used in making mattresses and doormats. So you talk about a versatile fruit, right?
Yep.
So the history of National Coconut Day, the Coconut Coalition of the Americas was founded in 2017 when coconut industry stakeholders realized there needed to be one unified voice for the North American coconut trade. So industry members came together to promote the facts about coconut oil and coconut products. And so that's why we now have National Coconut Day on June 26th. So there you have it. Lots of good information about coconuts and National Coconut Day.
Cool. Your
Yeah,
guest
right?
has arrived. So
My guest has arrived.
Yes.
Well, we have a special song for my guest. This is actually a special anniversary edition of WSKB. I've been announcing over the last couple of weeks that this is our 5th year anniversary for Community Talk Radio, which completely blows my mind. I just can't believe I've been doing this for 5 years. And I wanted to bring back the original host. I was the original co-host. He was the original host. So my guest for the rest of this show is going to be my co-host for today, former Mayor Dan Knapik. So we're going to bring Dan in with, we have a couple of Dan songs, and this one is Daniel by Elton John. So let's bring him in.
Daniel says it's the best place he's ever seen. Oh, Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Barnes & Noble College Bookstore in the Ely Campus Center, offering Westfield State t-shirts, sweatshirts, and gift merchandise, all of your academic needs, and offering textbook materials in new, used, ebook, and rental formats. Available at the bookstore on campus or online at westfieldstate.bncollege.com.
It's Tuesday morning from 6 till 8. Wow, it's Tuesday with Bob Plass.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB.
Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th. I can't get used to the fact that we're at Studio 120 here at Westfield Technical Academy. Yeah. Usually I have Pete right in front of me, so I wasn't paying attention to the signal. Did you give me the signal, Pete?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, you did. Okay.
You know the mic has opened up when I hit that last thing anyway.
Usually,
so.
yes. Yeah. When we're at Westfield State University, I can see you pushing buttons.
True.
And so I sort of know when to hop in. But anyway, so this is our special anniversary edition of Wake Up Wednesday. So it was actually 5 years ago on June 11th that former Mayor Dan Knappich and I embarked on our first radio show together. So welcome, Dan.
Well, thank you. It's a little bit later in the day, I think, this time around.
Well, we're just pretending now. Oh, okay. So it's June 26th and it's 6:20. Here you go. We're pretending this.
It worked a lot better for me this time.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. He was able to roll out of bed and get here on time. So, okay. So I want to talk first. This is really great because first of all, this is now my show. See, it was your show before, and I was just kind of the co-host. But now it being my show, I can actually interview you, which I've really been wanting to do. So that was fun. Well, it's interesting because a few years ago, Patrick Berry, who used to do the Thursday morning show, and I did the Wednesday morning show, and we had this brilliant idea of interviewing each other because when you host a show, nobody's really asking you questions, and you're sharing stuff about your life, but not necessarily professional things or whatever. So anyway, we decided to have each other on. Not at the same time, but we had each other on as guests, and I have to tell you, it was so funny when I interviewed Patrick. We got so involved in his history and in media and all of that stuff, and there were all these things that I didn't know about him. It actually ended up as a two-parter, right, Pete?
That's right.
We didn't get it all done the first time. It was like the first half, so I had him come back a few weeks later, and we finished it up. So I think it'll be interesting for the listeners, to get a little bit of perspective over there. So, but I want to flash back in time to 5 years ago. So my recollection is that you and I were at a meeting together a couple weeks before the first radio show, and there were some other department heads there, and partway through the meeting you looked at me and you said, "By the way, Tina, when we're done, I need to talk to you about something." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." So the meeting ended, and so I stayed back, and I said, "Okay, what's up?" And that's when you said, "Well, we're going to do this radio show together." And I said, "Excuse me, never having done this before."
What?
Yeah, pardon me. What is this? Wait, where was that in my job description that I missed that? So, you just said, this, we're going to do it. And, your brother at the time, Mike Knappich, was here at Westfield State University. And so anyway, it's like we're going to revive the talk radio from the past because I guess that had been done a while before,
NNZ.
right? Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Pete, and the history of that. So anyway, a few days before the first radio, I said, okay, well, that sounds like fun. Like I've never done anything like this before, but we'll see what this is all about. I've done community theater. How hard could radio be, right? So I went back and found the original emails that went back and forth. So this was how we prepared, everyone, all you listeners. This is how Dan and I prepared for the first show. So I wrote to you. Must have been on the 7th or so of June. So 4 or 5 days before the show. Mayor Dan, please give me a bit of information on the radio show. Time, location, etc. Tina, here's what I got back. This was from Dan. Show will be Wednesday and Friday, 6 to 8 through the summer. then likely 10 to 12 in the fall. So I'll leave it up to you on how much you want to co-host. Have a good weekend. Okay, that was that. So I said, okay. So my response is, okay, so we're on together on Wednesday morning. Which building is it in on the campus? Do you want me there by 5:45 or earlier? But here's my best question. Do we need to do any prep work ahead of time, or are we going to wing it?
Oh, knowing you over 5 years, Tina.
Yeah.
I know that was a great question on your part.
But see, the thing was, it wasn't my show. So the response to that on June 7th, 4 days before the show from Dan was, we can wing it. Bring some senior stats. Eli Campus Center. See you at 5:45. I'll text you the room location when I get there.
Tina read the email.
I said, sounds like a plan. See you Wednesday before the sun comes up. Tina.
I apologize today for the lack of detail.
You know,
those emails.
And yet here we are 5 years later.
But the honest to goodness truth on that was I didn't really know what to do.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like we had no idea. But and I will tell you that, and if you remember though, Dan, the student producer at that time was Jake Leon.
Jake Leon, yeah.
And so, it's this young kid, and I'm sure, and he said afterward, he's like, I'm thinking to myself, what are they going to do for we're going to talk. I mean, the students are used to playing music.
Yeah.
So they're just used to kind of doing a little music blurb, and then they just play a lot of music during their segments. So, he told me later on, he said, I'm thinking, what are you going to do what are you going to talk about for 2 hours? Well, at the end of the 2 hours, I mean, it's you and me. So it was kind of like, wow, it's 2 hours already? How did that get, it seemed like about 20 minutes.
And I think you brought some senior stats, right?
We did. I brought some senior stats. And because at that time, I brought some senior stats. At that time, we were not in the new senior center. We weren't even, we hadn't bonded it out or anything. We hadn't gone before city council. So I had actually contacted my contact over at the executive office of Elder Affairs. And I'm like, send me stats, I need something to talk about on the radio. So yeah, I came to armed with senior stats. And then of course, as we progressed, I came armed with more and more information and
certainly held up your part of the bargain.
I did. And I remember the time and I will tell you this too. So we do the first show, and then I think it was probably maybe after the second show. So you and I were leaving Eli Campus Center together, and you said, oh, and by the way, I'm going to be away for a few weeks. Remember, I'm going to be at the Cape for a few weeks. So then you start throwing 8 dates at me. So it's like, okay, Tina, so you're on your own. You can get another co-host if you want to get somebody, which of course I did. I remember.
I think was I there by then?
You were there.
Yeah, I was there before July 4th.
Okay, then you were there because Jake was only with us a couple of times, just a few shows in June. And then I had to do all these July and August shows. Not by myself. I remember the first person I recruited was John Vilas, because I thought if there's anybody who could talk as much as me, it's John, and he would have lots of stuff to say. And then I got creative on, who I was dragging into this whole thing. So yeah, I don't know. What was your recollection?
Well, so I remember when I was approached by Mike and Bo Sullivan about doing a show to kick this all off, and I'm like, I think at the time, they were just going to do the Wednesdays and Fridays to try it out, but the original block was going to be like a 4-hour block eventually. And I'm like, well, let's see, a couple things here. What was it that we were looking to, push out for public information over the next couple of years? And certainly, who was it that would be willing to get up at that ungodly hour of time? And I put the two together, put it in the supercomputer, and it came out your name.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, and I figured, who better to be on the show over the next few months, particularly when we're talking about a new senior center.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time early on those issues, and it was really good. And that turned into a lot of the different aspects of senior, what I'd call sharing that you have done since that. But that's literally, when I thought about those metrics, who is it that we could have a good time with, bring in some interesting guests, get here early in the morning, and then we could also use that as an opportunity to advocate for the new building.
Yep, and just to get some information out, which, it's interesting because I think over the years, that's been a great benefit to me. And I've talked to other directors about this who are super jealous. And I said, look, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of prep work. But the upside is that I have a whole segment to talk about what we're doing at the senior center, new programs, new activities, sort of do my own advertising and marketing marketing, if you will. And then I also do a whole other segment for everything going on in the rest of the city. And I know Bob Plass covers on his show, he does a lot of the cultural events. And I just kind of do a little bit of everything. And the theme has been, health and wellness, but that's a very broad theme. So that first summer, you started bringing in people. You brought Kenny in.
Yep, Kenny was good. There was an emerging Facebook presence.
Yes, that was the original reason why Kenny came on. It was Facebook Kenny. That was his name.
Kenny the Facebook guy.
Yeah, Kenny the Facebook guy.
An update as to what was being the chatter on the the page. He was I forget the name, whether it was some kind of community forum.
You're from Westfield If.
Yes, that's what it was.
And so there were people asking questions, and Kenny would ask me, before he got onto the show, like certain things, what was happening.
Yes.
What can I put back up on there? Because people would ask him questions through that forum, and so he became, that I think at the time, just like on the last Wednesday of the month or something.
Yep.
But then he became pretty good too, because I'm like, well, if I'm traveling, do
you
need some help? And that media became really more popular. So we would actually, as the show would be going on, we'd get commentary through that platform.
Yes.
And it just kind of grew from there. And both of you today have your own shows, and he holds down Tuesday, you hold down Wednesday, and it's it's great to have been able to play a small part in that all those years ago. And I just so you don't think that I just kind of slid my way through.
No. He's got the old folder.
I do have an old prep folder here. There's a few things missing in it. Kenny, I gave a few tidbits to him over the course of time.
I have to say,
that's the
Dan,
original
I'm
prep
very
folder.
impressed.
Yeah, so
I am very impressed.
Yep.
We've got this yellow prep folder
Yep.
that Dan Knappich brought in.
Yep. It's got all sorts of different things, like the history of Thanksgiving. That was one of my more favorite shows.
There you go. History of Thanksgiving.
TV, but
okay.
But so whatever came to my wavelengths during the weeks heading up to a show, I'd put it in the yellow folder.
Yep.
And we'd work that into a talking conversation point.
Well, you used to do didn't you? You used to do the the trivia contest thing,
yeah.
right? You did that for a while.
And Diana McLean had found the happiest city in Massachusetts, right?
There you go. See?
She had found it was like 100 questions from a trivia concert that took place back in I think it was probably 1969 for the 300.
Yes,
birthday, right?
I remember hearing about it.
Yeah, so that was actually a pretty good find. So we would use on Wednesdays, we would do a set of questions on that, and those were hard.
They were hard, and some of them were multiple choice, and they were still hard.
They still were hard, and back then we didn't have any significant underwriting capacity, so we didn't have anything to give out.
Right,
so
we didn't really have any. We didn't have any prizes.
They still played the game along with us.
They did, because it was just for the glory.
It was a lot of fun, and but we, I think part of the success of the show is we were able to talk about things that were occurring like right now, in real time.
Yes.
And we would do a section at the very end, and it was like a toss-up time, and everybody would say, what was the most reflective thing in the past week that happened?
Yep, I remember that.
And we would build from that. And one thing I was never really good at was remembering the phone number. So I remember writing it down here.
Yes. The number of the studio.
Yeah, the studio phone, right? So I'd always be looking at Pete and, hey, what's that phone number?
Exactly.
Out, right?
If you want to call in, especially with the answer, it's like, what's the number? Yeah. Exactly.
And, so the team at the college working with the radio club and the student advisor and whatnot, they, kind of, as we were doing our thing on air, it was building this momentum to build this 6 to 10 block Monday through Friday and have this complete coverage through the week. And what was interesting about our teaming up is the demographic in Westfield that would really appreciate what we were trying to do is certainly the demographic of the 50s through the 80s and beyond.
Yes.
Because they grew up on a local morning radio broadcast. So we were able to make that connection and offer folks at home a different type of experience in the morning. And you know what? All the early hosts that were approached, I remember Patrick, a nervous wreck about what he was going to do. How could I go? And he did. By the end, it was. I told him. I said, "I'm going to really miss."
I miss his show. I really miss his show.
He became a wonderful interviewer.
He was a great interviewer.
Yeah. He brought so many interesting people to the radio show to talk about, and then Bob was just like the laugh riot, that show, and Jay picked up on Fridays, and Mondays were always a bit of a trouble spot. I remember starting, I think it was...
They still are.
Yeah, with,
Monday 6 to 8 seems to be the rotating.
Yeah, they're challenging.
Yeah, Bill Parks was supposed to be like the first host, and he doesn't even show up for the first show.
They were gonna we were gonna do the rotating hosts from the nonprofits through the community. And
I remember talking to myself for half an hour, and somebody named Dan Knappik feeling really bad for me, going, "I'll come up there, man. I'm on my way."
Yeah.
So Bill eventually answered the bell, but I think it was for like the third hour of the show.
Something like that.
He still has the same problem nowadays, though.
Oh, does he? Yeah.
On his monthly show.
Yeah.
But no, it was a great experiment, and then the underwriting support came along, and I think to this day, as media continues to consolidate, one of the things I was just having a conversation on the Cape with some folks the other day. One of the things that's really problematic today in America is there is no opportunity for local news to percolate up through. And one of the things that stuck with me over the years was I was at the Republican office some years ago with Ted Laborde, and there's a huge pool reporter room over there. And he said to me, he goes, back when I started in the 70s, each one of those desks had 3 reporters assigned to it.
Yes.
Must have been like 200 reporters at one time. And now you look at how they do news. They might tell the photographer to take a photograph, fill something in, submit it online, and you're done. So what we have here in Westfield, between community radio, a daily newspaper, is really something unique and special that most other communities, they would love to have an opportunity like that.
I totally agree. And again, I just had a meeting with some of the other directors in the lower Pioneer Valley area, and I said when we talk about marketing and in terms of marketing, really just kind of getting the word out about what we do and who we are, I said, I've got it made. I mean, we've got radio shows local to Westfield. We've got, our own newspaper 6 days a week. It doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. And what was interesting with the Signal, when the college or the university had approached us at City Hall about being a partner in this, the signal was so weak. It was just like in the campus environment.
Yes.
And I remember driving somewhere, and you could get it out to the Wilbraham Friendlies sign on the turnpike. You can pick it up into Northampton, down onto the Connecticut border. We had somebody call in one day. They were somewhere in mid-Connecticut picking it up.
Wow.
And on the heading out to the west, you could pick it up all the way, I think, out to Lee, beyond in that area.
Wow.
So the signal on any given day can travel pretty good distance, and it can be pretty strong. And that really was a game changer for everybody.
Yes.
Now they realize that what we're talking about here can go beyond our borders. And I know invitations to the other mayors were brought forth to have a rotating part of the show so they can all experience. But clearly, what we do here is it's a gem. It's unique, and it's awesome.
The only one still doing that is Joe Didi.
Is it Joe?
Yes, Joe is. He is like clockwork.
We just taped a show with him over at Congamon Lake in the gazebo. We highlighted all the restaurants in Southwick, kind of what you used to do with the ice cream shops.
I actually just had ice cream with Joe the other day. He had his truck in town at my wife's business there that she's a partner in, and so I got a chance to catch up with Joe. He got a great sense of humor, that guy.
He is.
Still does.
And he's like clockwork. All right, we're going to take a break. So this song, this is going out to my husband, Gary. So tomorrow, June 27th, will be our 38th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you. So, Gary, this one's for you. It's called You're Still the One by Orleans.
After all these years, We're still having fun, and you're still the one. You are still the one that makes me proud. Still the one that I dream about. We're still having fun, and you're still the one. You are still the one. You're still the one. We're still having fun, and you're still the one.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley, with convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut. Visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
It's Tuesday morning from 6 till 8. Wow, it's Tuesday with Bob Plass.
Community Radio. 89.5 WSKB.
Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th. You're listening to WSKB 89.5 FM radio for the Westfield masses. My name is Tina Gorman. I'm your Wake Up Wednesday host. I'm in studio. Well, I'm actually at Studio 120 today at Westfield Technical Academy. And behind the boards and behind the glass in his little booth over there is Pete Coles. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning.
And my special guest on this anniversary edition is former Mayor Dan Knappich, now the town administrator for the town of Yarmouth. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. So good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Tina. Good morning, Pete. It's a little different to see you over there. You're not
I know, right?
quite as attractive as Robin Quivers.
There you go. There you go. So listen, since this is the anniversary edition, and I just have to tell this, I'll share this story on air. So tomorrow is, Gary, as I mentioned, Gary and I will be married 38 years. So several years ago, ladies, be careful about ever making this mistake. So several years, Gary and I went to the same high school, by the way. So we've known each other for a long time. Okay. But probably, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, Gary said to me, he said, I don't remember the first time we met. I mean, he said, I know we were friends in high school. He said, we had a mutual friend. Her name was Sharon. And when we were freshmen in high school, she had a birthday party. And her family was good friends with a family who owned a pretty upscale Chinese restaurant. I mean, it wasn't like a fast food. It wasn't a takeout or anything. It was a really beautiful restaurant. So for her birthday in her freshman year, her parents said, well, why don't you can invite a few friends, like 3 or 4 friends. And she invited me and she invited Gary. So Gary said, I remember that. He said, was that the first time that we met? And he goes, I think that was the first time we met. I said, no, that was not the first time we met. We met in 8th grade. Gary goes, what? He goes, I don't remember that. Stupid me. I should have stopped right there and said, yes, the first time we met was at that birthday party. But instead, I made the mistake of sharing my version of the story of how we met. So the story goes that this is the true version of how we met. So we were in 8th grade. Gary was very popular. Gary was voted most popular in our high school class when we graduated as seniors. You can imagine, like, very outgoing, schmoozing with everybody. So in 8th grade, I was not popular. And so we were in the lunchroom, and most of my friends were buying their lunch, but I had brought my lunch. So I sat down at the table, and I was waiting for my other friends to come over and sit with me. And at the other end of the table, because they were those long, cafeteria tables. Yeah. So at the other end of the table Gary was with his friends. So he went by and he said hello to me. But he said, hi, Tina. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Gary Gorman, I didn't even know that he knew my name. Oh my God. I made the mistake of telling Gary that. So this story has now morphed into how Gary felt so sorry for me. I was homely. I was, I was the ugly girl that nobody wanted anything to do with, and he felt badly. And so, little girl, I was like, what? First of all, he remembers none of this, and second of all, his fantasy version has completely changed this story. So everybody now, whenever anybody asks us, how did you two meet? Before I can open up my mouth, Gary goes, well, I'll tell you the story. I felt sorry for Tina and, blah, blah, blah. So you know what, ladies? Don't ever do that. If they can't remember, too bad.
If you have them over the barrel, keep them over the barrel.
Exactly. All right. So that's enough about me. We're here to talk about former Mayor Dan. So Dan, we're going to start with your background.
Yeah.
Like, you're a Westfield guy, right? Were you born in Westfield?
You know what?
Or were you born someplace else?
No, I'm actually one of in the last few years that Noble Hospital was still doing births. I was born at Noble.
Right at Noble Hospital.
Yes, yeah.
There are a few people that were.
And back then, that was a time in which, because I remember when my little brother was born.
Well, no, before you even go there, where are you? How many brothers and where are you in the line?
4 boys, and I'm number 3. So.
Oh, you're the third youngest.
Yeah.
So who's old?
Joseph is the oldest. He was was born in 61. Michael was 63. I was 67, and Neil was 72.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So I remember with Neil, my mom's bags being packed because having a baby back then was quite an ordeal.
Oh, yeah.
As it is today. But,
well, you went away for a long time.
Yeah, you went away.
Yeah.
So I count myself as an original Westfield native, no question.
Wow. Okay. So then you grew up, where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in,
actually
a new subdivision at the time. Was starting to put houses in the 60s in Birch Bluffs off of Shaker Road.
Okay.
And my parents, who were on East Silver Street at my brother's house today, they had 2 kids there, and they all moved into the new house in 65 or thereabouts. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so what happened? To Mike's house, the house that Mike is in now?
Yeah. So
did that stay in the family?
Yeah, that stayed in the family this
Okay.
whole time. That house was there. It dates back to the 1770s, and so that was the first house that my great grandparents bought around the turn of the century, about 1890, somewhere in that time frame.
Wow.
They had bought that, and they had duplexed it and
Okay.
started bringing over families from Slovakia. And that was eventually given to my grandfather in the 1930s at some point. And then, so my dad and my uncle John were raised in that house. The house next door where I owned today, that was my great-grandfather had built that house in 1914 or 15.
I didn't realize that was a family home as well.
So they had moved into that house. And that house in the mid-60s left the family in... I remember my mother telling me a story, something along the lines of, because it became available at the time, they were looking for a house, something like over my dead body while I live next to my father-in-law,
there you go.
Something along that line.
Something like that.
Yeah,
okay.
So the house left the family back then, but my uncle and his business partner at the time, another Westfield family, Jack Quinn, they bought it as an investment, I want to say probably 1987, and I bought it from them in 2000.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And so so now the house in Bluffs...
Birch Bluffs.
Birch Bluffs.
Yep.
So is that where you pretty much grew up?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. It was
Okay.
a great neighborhood. It was new. It was one of those neighborhoods where they were filled with kids.
Yes.
And, we were just waxing nostalgic about this over the weekend, that you could run from the morning on and come back home when the streetlights went on, and there was never a worry about being whatever it is, the problems today, and you could play in the street because it was a dead-ended area kind of at the time, and it was just I have great memories of growing up in that neighborhood. It was awesome.
So you grew up in the 60s?
Yeah, in the 70s.
70s,
yeah.
And I was younger in the 60s, but it was the same. I mean, same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood with tons of kids because we were all, our parents were all we were baby boomer kids.
Yep.
So everybody had like 4 and 5 and 6, and I think that somebody had 8, in my neighborhood. So it made a great baseball team, basketball
awesome.
team,
Yeah,
kickball
always
team,
something to
punch
do.
ball, whatever,
No
always something to do.
back then, right?
No, but you're right. I mean, but our parents didn't, everybody was kind of keeping an eye on everybody else.
Well, back then, a lot of moms didn't work.
Right,
So
I
there
was
was
gonna say
always
they weren't working
amazing
outside of the
to us.
home.
Well, Patrick grew up in my neighborhood too, so.
Okay.
And so you would always you would get dimed out every now and again for misbehaving, and there was this magical mom's surveillance program that you didn't know anything about. And
Exactly.
how did my mom find out?
Yeah,
that we were
and they didn't need electronics.
No,
They had a better
They
intelligence
had-
network than the
They
CIA.
absolutely did. They absolutely did. All right, folks, my guest this morning is former Mayor Dan Knappich, now town administrator for the town of Yarmouth out on the Cape. We're going to take a short break. This is my second dance song. I had 2 dance songs today. So this one is Dapper Dan by Michael Jackson. It's all about Dan who can dance.
Wow, that's not me.
There you
for the
go.
record.
Do it. He can do it. Watch him do it. I got rhythm and a whole lot of soul. I can dance. I can shake it, baby. He can dance. I'm just a little country boy. Harmonica in my hand. I got soul for rhythm in me. I'm a get down dancing man. A sha-la-la, boom, boom. My name is Dapper Dan. No. Sha-la-la, boom, boom. I'm a dancing man now. I'm gonna be king of the discotheque. That's where I can be found. Master of the rhythm beat, yo. I've got the fastest beat around. Sha-la-la-la, boom, boom. My name is Dapper Dan. Sha-la-la-la, sha-la-la-la, boom. Sha-la-la-la. I'm a dancing man. Sha-la-la-la. Do it. Hey, do it. Get out on the floor. Do it. That's what you wanna. Let's do it. Let's dance with me. I like the way he shakes it. I like the way he shakes it. I like the way he moves it. Ooh, he's sexy. Do it. I can do it. Watch me do it. I can dance. Do it. I can do it. Let me show you I'm a dancing man. I got rhythm and a whole lot of soul. I can dance. Dance. I got the music and I know how to use it. I can sing. Dance. Do it. I can do it. Watch me do it. I can do it. Watch me do it. I can dance. I like the way he shakes it. I like the way he shakes it. I like the way he moves it. Ooh, he's sexy. Do it. I can do it. Watch me do it. I can dance. Do it. I can do it. Let me show you I'm a dancing man. He's a dancing man. He's a singing man. Do it. I can do it. Watch me do it. I can do it. Watch me do it. I can dance. Do it. I can do it. Let me show you I'm a dancing man. He's a dancing man.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Barnes & Noble College Bookstore in the Ely Campus Center, offering Westfield State t-shirts, sweatshirts, and gift merchandise, all of your academic needs, and offering textbook materials in new, used, ebook, and rental formats. Available at the bookstore on campus or online at westfieldstate.bncollege.com.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardy siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com, they are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Wednesday mornings from 6 till 8, it's Tina Gorman with Wake Up Wednesday.
Community Radio, 89.5 WSKB.
Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th. You're listening to WSKB 89.5 FM radio for the Westfield Masses. This is our special 5-year anniversary edition of Wake Up Wednesday. My guest this morning is former Westfield Mayor Dan Knappich and now Town Administrator for the town of Yarmouth. So welcome again.
Thank you, Tina. It's a pleasure being here and being thought of all these years later.
I know. Well, we're going to get into sort of how, kind of where you've been and where you've come. So let's get back to, we talked a little bit about your personal background and growing up in Westfield. Where did you go to school? Did you go to Westfield High School?
Yeah, I went to Westfield High School, graduated in 1985, and actually one of my classmates and good friends over the years was Don Humison.
Oh my
gosh!
Was
an 85 grad, yeah.
Okay.
And Patrick Barry went to St. Mary's.
He did.
And he was an 85 graduate as well. In our neighborhood, we had a good mix of St. Mary's kids, high school, public school kids, and Voc Tech kids at the time. At the time, it was Westfield Vocational School.
Yeah.
So we all got together, and we free-ranged played, and then we all kind of went our separate ways in high school. But to this day, I still count amongst my closest friends those guys from the neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I went to Abner Gibbs along the way in the South Middle School, and it's kind of interesting because my kids are doing the same thing. They spent a couple of years at Abner Gibbs, went to St. Mary's Elementary. Now they're back, and one of them will be going to the middle school next year, and the other one's still at the new intermediate school. So that's it's kind of nice to they walk the same halls I did.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so now, where did you go to college?
I went to college at Fairfield University down in Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Yeah.
And what did you study?
Strangely enough, I started out as a history major, and I just had bad vibes with the history chair. So I one of the crossover classes I took was a political science class, and the professor there at the time that taught that class was a World War II vet, and he just was a really good role model. And it's kind of freshman year, kind of like lost soul. What are you trying to do? And one thing I wanted to do was get my a license to teach school. So that was like at Fairfield and in Connecticut, you had to get a bachelor's degree in a major field of study. Then the educational credits were a minor field. So he said something in a class early on in my freshman year. He says, the next 4 years is going to be a challenge, and kids don't always know what they want to do. But I'd encourage you to think, what is it that you want to learn that makes you pick up that book when you're dead tired, to do a little extra studying, or that comes natural to you, so you have a natural desire to want to go further down that line of reasoning, inquiry, or whatever. And the fact is, I sat back and I listened to that. What is it that I really would inspire me to want to work that much harder? And it ended up being the School of Political Science. And in that, it's American government, governments of the world, and you learn an awful lot about campaigning there. And that's also the same track for pre-law. And I thought for a short time I wanted to be a lawyer, but back then you had to do briefs for constitutional law classes by hand.
Yeah.
So you'd have to go to the law library, look at the actual books and run down your supporting briefs. And I'm like, I'm not thinking I want to do that.
Maybe not so much. Okay.
Yeah, but I ended up student teaching at Fairfield High School in my senior year, which was quite an experience. It was like Beverly Hills 90210.
Really?
Before there was a Beverly Hills 90210.
Well, yeah, Connecticut. Yep. Okay.
And it was the kids would literally roll off the beach in their beach attire to come to class.
Oh, there you go.
And it was like, wow, this is kind of an interesting situation here,
And what were you teaching?
I was teaching at that time. A lot of the coursework was on American history and humanities. So in social studies, which was what my license was, and you could do anything from economics to geography.
Yeah, that's a pretty wide range.
It was a great experience. The teacher that I taught with, he was a 2-time Connecticut Teacher of the Year. Fabulous guy. And I remember saying to him one time, his name was Jack Strauss, and I said, Jack, how is it you can just go into these topics from this one to that one and with such authority? And he goes, if you stay in this game long enough, you'll know that answer in a few years.
Yes.
And so I ended up getting a job along the way as an intern in a brand new field, environmental consulting, and I stayed with that for almost 20 years. And but I taught a lot of adults back then, and people would say to you, how do you know all that stuff? It's like, well, eventually it will come to you too.
Eventually, there
you
you
stay
go.
there. So I had a great.
How did you transition from political science to environmental?
Yeah, so that was
science.
That's back then. The economy was terrible, So
Okay.
I'm looking for jobs. A lot of the Wall Street collapse was in '87. So if you were into going to New York City, we're still kind of recovering. But the economy here in Massachusetts, remember the miracle of Massachusetts?
Well, I was not here
Jersey,
then. I was, we were in.
Yeah.
We were kind of all over the place trying to get ourselves through grad school.
Yeah, so the Massachusetts economy had literally collapsed. Yeah. And so when I was ending my sophomore year, my oldest brother, Joe, was a environmental scientist with a firm that had just sprung up out of East Long Meadow in a brand new field of asbestos consulting and indoor air quality. And he offered me a job, and I remember that job like yesterday, $7 an hour in bottom of the basement. But it was great work. It was doing monitoring of construction sites for safety and health violations of the emerging regulations back then. But the thing that I liked about it the most was the autonomy and the freedom to travel. The jobs were all over. My territory was Berkshire County and in eastern New York State. So I got to see these great areas of the Commonwealth that nobody would ever probably drive through. And it was something that when I graduated, I went to the management of the company. They were out East Long Meadow, and I said, hey, could I get a full-time job here? And they said, sure, right? So I had never put a resume together or had to look for a job until I was leaving the mayor's office in 2015, all those years later.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, but you know what? It's funny. I mean, when I was teaching at Springfield College, I used to tell my students, network.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you can network enough, you don't have to do that. I mean,
exactly what
and
happened.
Gary was the same way.
Yep.
It was years and years before he ever had to, put together a resume or a CV or anything.
Looking
like
for
that.
a job?
So,
What's that?
yeah, it's like, what's that all about? All right, so this is a good time to kind of take a little break. We're at the top of the hour. You're listening to WSKB 89.5 FM radio for the Westfield masses. This is our special 5-year WSKB Talk Radio Anniversary Edition. We've got former Mayor Dan Knappich with us, who was the original host of Wake Up Wednesday. So we're going to take a short break. We will be
Community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Dental. Comprehensive dentistry at 14 convenient locations in Springfield, Chicopee, Long Meadow, West Springfield, Belchertown, East Long Meadow, Ludlow, Northampton, Greenfield, and Wilbraham, as well as 29 Broad Street in Westfield. Bay State Dental makes it a priority to help you achieve and maintain the healthy smile you deserve. On the web at baystatedental.com.
Wednesday mornings from 6 till 8, it's Tina Gorman with Wake Up Wednesday.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB.
Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th. You're listening to the 5-year anniversary edition of WSKB Talk Radio. My name is Tina Gorman. I'm your Wake Up Wednesday host, and we are at Studio 120, which is at Westfield Technical Academy. This is Pete Coles' studio. So Pete is our producer.
I'm glad Patrick's name for this place didn't stick.
No, I know.
What was that?
That was Pete's playground. Was it? Or it's something like
It's
that.
kind of like a romper room in here.
No.
Okay.
So Studio 120. I didn't say the other Pete until you brought it up. But anyway.
I know, but it's out there.
It is. It's all out there. My special guest this morning is the original host of Wake Up Wednesday, former Mayor Dan Knappich. Good morning again, Dan, and welcome back.
Good morning, Tina. It's a pleasure to be back here.
I'm so excited. This is really fun interviewing you. So we've gotten you through high school and college and your first job with this. What was the name of the company?
The name of the company was a company called Contest, CON-TEST Incorporated Analytical Lab.
Oh, a little play
Their
on
laboratory
words.
still exists
Still
in
exists?
Long Meadow. Yeah.
No kidding.
And the original owners of the laboratory still own it today.
And so how long did you work there?
I worked there from 87 to 94. And then
That's a good long
it
time.
was a great, it was a bunch of it was a new field. The environmental business was all brand new at the time, and the workforce was mostly in their 20s. The management core was.
Well, that's what I was going to say. My guess is that it was a younger
Oh,
work
absolutely.
group. So
the owners at the time were probably in their early 40s.
No kidding.
Yeah, so it was a great family atmosphere. I tell people all the time it was I think I came on board when there might have been 60 or 70 employees, and by the time I left, it was 250.
Wow.
And it was just a great atmosphere to have your first real job after college.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so then what was your second real job after? So why did you leave?
Yeah, well, I got to the point we had been bought out by a much larger company, and I kind of took a look at their structure, where I could go. I was in management at that firm, and I was kind of capped out in the New England region on opportunity. So I'm like, if I'm ever going to do something self-employed, now's the time to do it. So I picked up a job interim for a construction company out in Boston as a safety manager for them, and that was pretty good. And that gave me enough time to file the paperwork for my own business.
Okay.
And eventually, after a year, I stepped out, and that's kind of, my mother still can't believe I did this. I just cut the cord to a good paying job.
Yeah, I know.
And I went out and tried to make it on my own, and I had a great run. And I had very modest business expectations. I was 28, I think, at the time, and I said, I get about $500, $600, $700 a day to do what I do. Man, if I do that 3 days a week, I can get some good golf in. And
oh my God, you are hysterical. At 28, you were
right?
already
20,
figuring
absolutely.
this out.
Well, back then, this is kind of an interesting evolution because golf's in like a tailspin terribly. But back then, one of the things doing what we did, golf is where you conduct a lot of business.
Yes.
Right? So when I was out on business trips across the country, military bases and whatnot, everything revolved around you had your own expense account to some degree, and you could go and entertain your clients. So it was still kind of a thing to do. And it worked out great. The first, I think, year and a half was awesome like that, and then it just got busier and busier, and it, next thing you know, I was doing parts of the business that I didn't enjoy doing, which was the, invoicing and collectibles and all that kind of stuff. And so it got to be 1999, and I had an offer to sell the company in July.
So did you have people working for you, or were you
just subcontractors?
So
so I 1099 people.
Okay. Yep.
Didn't want to take on that. A lot of it was my own. Consulting services where people were buying, but I had a couple of reliable folks, but that decision needed to make. The next step would have been to get a line of capital and go out and grow. And what was interesting at that time, because you didn't know that you were living at that time, that things were kind of getting kind of tough in the business world. By September of that year, the industrial economy and the construction economy was slowing down, and that's where I was generating a lot of my work. And And looking back at it, I started thinking about, what should the future be? Because now you're in your, early to mid 30s, and I'm like, well, I could capitalize this and go do this on my own. Or, this offer's pretty good. Why don't I go back and talk to them?
Okay.
So I did. I went back to talk to the ownership at a company called Environmental Compliance Service over in Agawam, and I think we handshook a deal in November of '99 and signed the paperwork to transition the company to their ownership January 1, 2000.
Okay.
And I stayed there full-time right through to the end, till January 2010.
Okay.
And then, interestingly enough, I was able to, along the way, buy ownership into that firm. And then it turned over in probably like 2007 or so into an employee-owned company, which is a pretty novel idea. So that was a great company to work for. It was a much larger corporation than the one that I'd worked for earlier on. But it was family-owned. It was 4 individuals that they were good quality local guys, and they developed a partnership over the years, and we had a lot of fun doing that.
And was it sort of the same type of work that you
It was
had
similar,
been doing?
yeah. In my division that I led is the same kind of work. Plus, their customer base was larger than what I had, so more of my work was being generated locally, which is nice.
So you weren't traveling.
Yeah,
as much
a lot of my customers were in the New York City area and in other parts west, and it just gets to be a grind after a while.
So I want to transition into your years on the city council.
Yeah.
So when did that all happen?
Yeah, that's
like I'm
interesting,
trying
right?
to figure out like how did that juxtaposition into here?
I tell people this story all the time because I always never shortchange your own ability to change a dynamic, if you want to get involved. So I'd sold the business, and now I was spending more time in Westfield.
Okay.
And spending more time here, I was paying more attention to things locally that was going on. And at the time, we had a number of business opportunities proposed to the city of Westfield, and for a lot of different reasons, the city permitting process froze up, couldn't get them over the line, and it kind of struck me that there was no strong advocacy for the business community back then. And so one of the things on a kind of a sleepy day, I decided to go down to City Hall. I knew Mayor Sullivan at the time, the original Mayor Sullivan, Rick Sullivan. And I said, hey, I'd like to know what you got planned for the city. He'd been in office since '94, I think, at that time. So he's about, 8 years in. And he goes, well, why don't you go up to the third floor, see Mark Rosati, the city engineer, and see what he's got for plans. And so I went up, saw Mark, and I knew Mark a little bit before, the old Westfield family too. And he went into his planning room, and he showed me all these designs for Main Street, Broad Street, the Great River Bridge, the Gaslight District, Old Town neighborhood improvements. And as he's going through these, Mark, Mark.
Yeah,
Mark is, he just is he gets so excited, and you could see the spark in his eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around at what we got now, and at the time the city was in a bit of a decay on a lot of fronts, and I'm like, wow, Mark, that's exciting. He goes, yeah, we've been working on these things for years, and that this is the time. It's soon, right? So all right. So I went down to see the mayor, and I said, what could I do to help you? I mean, I saw what the future looks like. I want to be part of this. He says, well, I could really use some support on the city council. All right, what do you got to do? He says, go down to the city clerk's office and take out some nomination forms, collect 50 signatures, and get elected. All right. So
really?
So that's what I did.
So did you at the time though? Did you know? Did you know people on the city council?
I knew some of them.
Sort of
interesting. Yeah.
City council stuff.
Brian Sullivan had gotten on, I believe, in '98, and I remember going to his campaign parties back then. Chris Crean had gotten on around that same time, and some of the other individuals that were on the council at the time I had known. They were typically a generation older, but there was definitely and Brent Bean and I were talking about it at the same time because he and I had kind of had a similar trajectory. So it was like, you know what? We got to get the city to start thinking like you would if you were a young professional, like the future's in front of us, not like this is my last paycheck, type of idea. And so there was a representative in Ward 2 at the time that was here. So I actually, I tracked him down and I asked him his philosophy on a few things. And fair to say we were not in alignment with what he thought how you could do things. And so I made it a commitment to run, and he ended up not running for that seat again. And then I got elected in the fall of 2001 and sworn in 2002 and set to work right away on downtown revitalization.
Wow, so 2002. Okay,
2002,
all right.
Yeah.
And so, so how many years did you serve on the city council then?
Yeah, so 8 years then in 4 terms. And, my focus at that time was to change some of the, conversation around bringing in businesses and to get it to be more, analytical in its process as opposed to being emotional about things.
Yeah.
And then, but I represented Ward 2, which was all of downtown at the time. And so a lot of my focus was, how is the city going to be a good partner with us in rebuilding our neighborhoods? And we embarked on a pretty ambitious project to rebuild the neighborhoods. It was called Old Town Phase 1, like McKinley Terrace, East Silver Street, up towards Abner Gibbs School, and then up at top of Pachasik Hill, the neighborhoods up there, new curbing, sidewalks, and whatnot. And that was exciting because it's a high elderly density, and the sidewalks were in tough shape, and everything else. And the city, frankly, looked pretty shabby back then.
So when you were first elected to the city council, Dan, what subcommittees did you serve on?
I want to say health and safety was probably one of the first ones because of my background.
Makes sense, sure.
And then I want to say Adam Liptak was a counselor at the time. And he was one of the great mentors of young counselors back then. Great guy, just a salt of the earth. And I served on the Personnel Action Committee with him.
Okay.
And that's the, that's the appointing approval
I
committee
do.
process. And Adam was like, hey, anybody you want to bring in, just let me know. We'll bring them in. And, and I got to know a lot of the folks that work for the city in that
Yes,
role.
yes.
And then he assigned me, it probably was, maybe Brian was the president at the time, but I got us attached, whether it was my first or second year, I don't remember, but to Legislative and Ordinance Committee under Charlie Medeiros, which was quite an interesting situation for sure. Charlie always had a colorful story and personality. But I learned a lot on how to legislate, get things done, and Charlie imparted some great words of wisdom, which was, just remember, at the end of the day, a half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. So
there
keep
you
an
go.
open mind.
Words to live by.
So after that, I kind of over the years on the council became the L&O person for many years, and stayed that way. And one committee I never served on was finance. So
really?
Yeah, because I'd rather do more. I enjoyed reviewing the zoning process, the legislative process, and that was more my desire line. I didn't really want to delve into the financial aspects of that operation at the time. At the time, too, I think John Liptak came on board sometime in that early 2000 series.
And
I'm
and
well,
he
better,
obviously,
he's a CPA, right?
Absolutely. So now, when you were elected to the council, have they always had 13 members on the council?
No, actually, interestingly, we had 11 when I got elected. So the census in 2000 brought us to 13, but there was a time period where we had a couple of deaths in the council, and it went down to a 9-member council, like it used to be in Springfield. And that was interesting because, today they have 13, but the addition of 4 personalities, when you're down to 9, and most of you were in kind of the same viewpoint on your philosophies on things went very speedily. So we didn't have very long meetings or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and the reason I ask is because when I've talked to, people and other directors and so forth, 13 is a very large city council.
It is.
You've got, and we'll talk about that more later as we kind of do a little bit of comparing in a few minutes to your current position. You are listening to WSKB 89.5 FM radio for the Westfield Masses. I have to use my cheat sheet here to tell you what song we are for this quarter hour. Oh, this is in honor of Billy Davis Jr., his birthday. He was one of the founding members of the Fifth Dimension. So this one is Go Where You Want to Go. I thought this would be appropriate for talking about the
Where
Cape.
we're going.
Yeah, exactly.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Dental. Comprehensive dentistry at 14 convenient locations in Springfield, Chicopee, Longmeadow, West Springfield, Belchertown, East Longmeadow, Ludlow, Northampton, Greenfield, and Wilbraham, as well as 29 Broad Street in Westfield. Bay State Dental makes it a priority to help you achieve and maintain the healthy smile you deserve. On the web at baystatedental.com. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Barnes & Noble College Bookstore in the Ely Campus Center, offering Westfield State t-shirts, sweatshirts, and gift merchandise, all of your academic needs, and offering textbook materials in new, used, ebook, and rental formats. Available at the bookstore on campus or online at westfieldsstate.bncollege.com.
Wednesday mornings from 6 till 8, it's Tina Gorman with Wake Up Wednesday.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th. You're listening to the 5-year anniversary edition of Wake Up Wednesday on WSKB 89.5 FM radio for the Westfield masses. My name is Tina Gorman, and I've been your Wake Up Wednesday hostess since the fall 5 years ago, but the original host was the former mayor, Dan Knappich, and he is my guest this morning, so welcome again, Dan.
Thank you, Tina. And those were very heady days. They use that phrase a lot in Waxing Nostalgic in the summer. Didn't really know where it was going to go or what we were going to do, although you were exceptionally well prepared for all my shows.
Here we are.
But here we are 5 years later. It's awesome.
I do remember the time not too far into it, because I realized, as we kind of went through that first summer, that it's helpful to have, I'd bring like all the, the Stanley concert series and the Amelia Park. So, I started really paying, I would start, going through the Penny Saver and, what's going on in announcements. And then, we kind of started to throw in some famous national days. We started doing those kinds of things. And I remember coming in one time and, I was in there and you came in a couple minutes late and you said to me, have you done any prep work? And I said, yeah, I've got, all this stuff. And I will never forget this, Dan. You looked at me and you said, good, because I got nothing. I got nothing. I mean, you came in like empty-handed. I don't know what was going on.
I remember those days.
Remember those days? Like there was something going on with the kids and, blah, 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 and all this stuff was happening. And I just started laughing.
Well, the weeks would roll into each other, right? Before
that was it all of a sudden. You're like, oh, my God, we're on the radio again? All right. So listen. So now we've gotten you to city council years. But, it's a leap to go from a city councilor to deciding that you want to run for mayor.
Yeah.
So talk about that. What was that decision-making process like, and what transpired that? I mean, what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a good career in business.
Yeah.
Didn't think I was going to go anywhere there. I mean, as far as like I'd stay with business.
Right.
The city council was, I said, it was the greatest part-time job I ever had. And I was very comfortable with that. But we had got into, by 2008, the recession had really taken root.
Yes.
And then 2009, it was, we were deep on us, and things weren't going well. And I, the overall conversation as to how or what we should be doing as a community was, in preparing for that or what we're going to do to dig out of this, wasn't happening. So I explained to people, I was at a friend of ours' party. At this time, I think there was already 3 people announced that they were running. It was 4th of July weekend at the time. We're around a party late at night, 11 o'clock, and with a group of guys, and I'm like, I've been thinking about running for mayor, and they all just start laughing. I mean, laughing.
Really?
Just unbelievable.
Really?
Because they're all business people,
yes.
And they're like, so after they calm down again, I go, no, serious. I think I bring something to the table that we need, and the laughing starts again,
Mm-hmm.
And so finally afterwards, they came back to normality, if you will, and they're like,
yes.
You sure you want to do that? I go, yeah. Like, all right, count us in. What do you need?
Oh,
and so
awesome.
from that meeting, we put together a campaign team in early July, and then announced sometime in late July that I was going to run. So I was the last person in, and I think by that time we had a 5-member field.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I got into
That's right.
it.
I do remember.
Yeah.
Originally I'm thinking to myself, who? But now it's coming back to me.
So
I do remember that.
Yeah, I tell people that, I'd be knocking on people's doors asking for their vote, and somebody'd say, well, what drives you to do that? And it's like, you really can't explain it. If
Yeah.
you want to do it strong enough, something just turns you on every day, and you just start going. And it just stayed with me. We had a good plan, we had a good team, and you couldn't, work hard enough to get your message out. And I knocked on thousands of doors that summer. And, a lot of times I think back like, wow, this is a lot of work.
Yes.
Well,
I know it's one of those things where in retrospect you think, oh my God, how did I do that?
I have 2 babies at home. I got a regular job that had demands on me, and I'm like, what have I bitten off more than I could chew? And going through that process that culminated in a primary or preliminary election in September, which I had won. And you realize, okay, well, that's not it. That's only halfway there.
Right.
Like,
We're not
okay,
done
so you
yet.
got to get back on the horse and run to November. And we did. And it was a great night, and had a lot of supporters along the way. Picked up a lot of new friends, and from the moment we landed, got on it and stepped on it for the next 6 years.
Well, let me ask you something, because when I interview employees, potential employees, and even student interns, my question to them is, and I've schooled my daughter Grace in, sort of the other end of the interview process. And my question is always, what are you bringing to the table? So I guess my question to you is, what were you thinking? Like, if I had asked you, which I didn't.
Why would I vote for you?
But it's exactly. It's like, well, what are you bringing to the table? Why should I vote for you? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think there's a few distinct points that you have to have a campaign, and the campaign stands for what it is that you believe in. So pride back in our city. The city had become kind of shabby looking.
Yep.
These are some of the things we can do: improve our public spaces, put a multi-point plan to improve our parklands and recreation. Schools became a big aspect of it. The school situation had been in kind of disarray at that time, for sure. The Juniper Park situation was still kind of problematic, and a lot of the schools at that time were overcrowding was an issue. We had an opportunity to build a new school on the horizon. Fiscal stability. I came from a time, and I would tell when I came back to the council in 2016, I would tell some of the younger councilors, I'm like, you guys think we don't have any money now? Back when I was on the first time, we didn't have any. That was when you had no money.
Yeah, there was
no nothing
money
in the bank. And Mayor Sullivan at the time would say, yep, this budget balances. And we'd always ask him, well, what do we do if there's an emergency? You got like a nickel in stabilization. And he's like, well, we'll conquer that when it gets here. And so one of the things in my last few years on the council in that era that we worked with Jimmy Adams, particularly, and John Liptak, was to build the stabilization accounts and our reserve accounts, and build our bonding capacity back up so that we could actually take on. Because we all kind of knew there was a big on the horizon, a big amount of repair work that needed to be done. So fiscal stability and management, as the metrics in the economy were going south, we were losing millions of dollars of state aid into the city. All I could hear were talks of cuts. And after a while, you get tired of that.
Yeah.
And you're like, there must be a better way to do this. And so it was really about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. What are the resources that you can have? And one of the things, like right now, they're dealing with is the Cabot Road site. Well, back then it was going to be a former landfill, but that ship sailed in the early 90s when the state stopped permitting those. So we went down the process of permitting that for a new industrial park. And what was interesting, by 2013, when the zone change occurred, you couldn't find anybody to take any parcels.
Right.
The economy was still in hangover.
Right.
But today, that's the largest single parcel, I believe, in the state of industrial A, project-ready parcel. And it's like all these years later, there's clamoring for that. So it was pretty much around those. We'll bring stability back, right the ship financially, reinvest in our parks and playground spaces and the schools issues. And that's what I would tell people.
And, in retrospect, Dan, what would you say were some of your biggest challenges as mayor?
Well, the biggest one right out of the gate was the local aid numbers, that between the school aid, Chapter 70, and unrestricted local aid, I mean, I forget now whether we were down $5 or $7 million. It was like
that's a
free
significant
fall.
number.
And so what happened is, in the course of time, the burden on the property tax became much more large. So property tax today has never been a larger part of the municipal budget because the state kind of peeled out of it. And those numbers still haven't really come back, and adjusted for inflation, they definitely have not come back.
Right.
But that was the single biggest thing. But I was just telling this story to somebody yesterday. On my very first week on the job, 2 things happened that kind of like man, I can't believe we're living through this. One, it was like a Wednesday, and I get TV reporters out in front of City Hall. And I'm like, what are they here for? Apparently, in the Head Start program, a child was left on one of the buses.
Oh, geez.
And at the time, I didn't know what our story was with Head Start. And turns out we own Head Start and we own the bus company. So I'm the mayor. They want a statement on that,
So
right?
there you go.
So that was that. And then in December, I'd been in a meeting with the District 2 Superintendent for Mass Highway about the Chasik Street Bridge, and he's like, Mayor, don't worry about it. It's good for a year. We'll get the design work done. We'll roll right into construction. No problems. That first week on the job, I get a call from Mass Highway. You need to shut the bridge down. And I remember saying a guy's name, I believe was Al Stegman. I said, Al, what could have happened in a month's time? You know, that was a lot worse than we thought. Got to shut it down. And people were upset about that.
Sure.
And what made that a real big problem was that the design work hadn't even really begun yet.
Yes.
So it was a long haul, closing down that artery. So those were big challenges early on. But certainly the economy was kind of the specter of, it hemmed you in on so many fronts. We were in contract negotiations. There wasn't any money to give back then. But the other thing that turned out to be much more problematic than we had thought early on was the amount of renovation work that needed to be done on our building infrastructure.
Yeah.
Everywhere you looked, there was something wrong. And every day I'd get a report in that, this one was in bad shape, that's in bad shape. The police department had serious structural problems, Tech, you name it. And it was like, how are we going to get out of this? And so we put a plan together, and I remember in 2012 talking to the MSBA. We were at the time like the second largest recipient of state repair aid, and they wanted to congratulate me, and they also asked if we could afford it to finance all these projects. It was in the tens of millions of dollars we would need to come up with. And I said to the person at the time, I said, well, I'm not seeing how we could not afford to.
Yeah, right. What are you going to do?
As far as congratulations goes, kind of a dubious distinction, because if I'm getting this much money, it's because a lot of things went wrong, right?
Didn't happen.
And so we, that's what led to Tech, the rebuild of that in all the different schools. Paper Mill, Munger had work done from the tornadoes and in the storms and all that. And so that I remember going through that borrowing sequence with the city council. And I'm like, geez, I'm about to borrow more money than any mayor ever has in the middle of a recession. This is crazy. But the plan was there, and we needed to get that done to preserve those buildings. Because I remember when the state came to this building to look at renovating it, they're like, nah, you should take this down. Like, that's not happening. We're going to fix this thing. And, $100 million Vogue School, I don't think so. We're going to, we put 15 or 16 million into it. And it looks fabulous today. Yeah, does it need some more work? It sure does. Sure. But that never goes away. We have a huge footprint in Westfield, like a physical footprint. And you got to do a lot of things, and you got to spend some money to do that. So I think the thing that I definitely did not know was going to happen for sure were the natural disasters. So I remember just before I took office meeting Rick Sullivan up at the Old Friendlies up on the Turnpike, asked them all these questions about, would you do this?
I want to be prepared.
So one of the things that I never asked them is, what do you do about an emergency declaration, like a natural disaster? And so I remember when the tornado was afterwards, we were on at Little River Station, and I'm on the phone with him. I go, Rick, there was one question I didn't ask you. But we went through five federally declared natural disasters in my time.
There was like 3 in 1 year.
Yeah, 3 in 1 year. The snow, the tornado, and the Irene flood, and then the October.
Everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah, the October snowstorm.
That's the same year we had that earthquake too. In the middle of the summer.
Yeah, and that, that was something that so I'm in Yarmouth last year, and we had a tough set of storms in March of last year. Remember, I called in the radio show.
I remember.
And we have like a FEMA wrap-up meeting going on in April, and I walk in the room, they all look at me like, we know you.
Yes, you do.
They were all stationed at the Westwood. They took over the 4th floor, and every time they would demobilize to get ready to be moved somewhere else, we'd get hit with something else.
Yeah, come on back.
Yeah.
All right, we are going to take a short break, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes while we play. This is "Take My Breath Away" from Top Gun. This is in honor of the birthday of Terry Nunn from Berlin. But while this song is playing, the next question I'm going to ask you is some of your greatest successes when you were as mayor. We've talked about your challenges, so think about all the successes. All right, Pete, we will be back.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardie siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com, they are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Support for community radio on WSKB provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Wednesday mornings from 6 till 8, it's Tina Gorman with Wake Up Wednesday.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is Wednesday, June 26th, and we're actually broadcasting from Studio 120 at the on the campus of Westfield Technical Academy, not Westfield State University this morning. This is our special 5-year anniversary WSKB edition. So it's been 5 years since we reinstituted, I guess, talk radio here in Westfield. And the host of that Wake Up Wednesday show is with me this morning, the former Mayor Dan Knappich. Welcome again, Dan.
Thank you, Tina. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's great to. I can't, 5 years.
It's
a long time. Yeah, old school. So we're kind of going through your history a little bit, and we've gotten you through the city council and into the mayor. We've talked about the challenges. So money. reception, natural disasters. So the only thing you didn't
Just
have.
the garden variety
I know.
stuff.
It's like the only thing you didn't have was locusts, for God's sakes.
Huh? Yeah.
All right, so.
Plague, yeah.
But in those years, so how many years were you mayor?
6 years.
Okay, so in those 6 years, what are your successes?
That's a great question.
What would you say?
What would I say? Well, one of them for sure. I remember when I was running early on, I made a promise to you.
Yes, you did.
I made a promise that when I was elected, we'd build that senior center.
Yes.
And we did it.
Yes.
Thank you.
We did it.
That had been, when I went back to the archives, that had been a hot topic in the city for 40 years or more. And it seemed like every few election cycles, it would get its own momentum. We're gonna do it this time, right? And I told you, I said, no, we're actually going to do it this time.
Yeah. And I did not believe you because the seniors didn't. And I didn't have the history, but they had the history.
And I told you this before. I said, one of the things that when when you're in this position, you know all the things that are in front of the city generally, and there's more needs and wants than there ever would be resources. Yeah. But I always thought about when I would read through the old newspaper accounts of the senior center efforts, and I always thought about how many were here, and they thought it was going to get done, and then they passed away before that happened. And I went over early on to Agawam, and I spent some time with the folks over at the Agawam Center. And what was interesting is I ran across 3 guys in their 50s, recently retired, shooting a game of pool over there, and they couldn't. This place is fabulous. This is where we go. Yeah. And I'm like, what? Came back from that. We got to do this some shape, form, way or another. I didn't realize the journey to get to where it is was going to be as complicated. But there's an old saying in town: if it wouldn't be easy if it was Westfield, right?
Well, and you know what? I think it's one of those things where, in retrospect, like I would never want to be in the position where I had to do that again. Yeah. It's just one of those things where it's daunting.
It is.
But when you don't, you just you leap in, and it's like you said, we're doing this, and I said, okay, well, I'm a department head, so I have no choice here. And I learned a lot as I went along. I mean, I can remember sitting at meetings with with my hard hat on out in the trailer, and Brian Ferret, who is now the facilities director, was next to me whispering in my ear, because I would be saying to Brian, what are we, I don't even know what we're talking about, because the lingo was different, the acronyms were different, it's all construction talk. This is a little out of my league. And I remember Brian saying, it was almost, because we had those meetings weekly, and he would say to me, after the meeting, we'll go over into the building and I'll show you, because he learned very quickly that I'm really visual. So as soon as he did that, he said, they want to know, Tina, do you want it this way or that way? Once he showed me and I went, oh, I want it that way. He goes, okay. That's and that's what we learned to do.
It that way.
But you're right. I mean, it was pretty daunting, and I'm not quite sure how we even got the money
coming from where you were in such a small space.
Yeah.
But if I look back, there's a couple of others I think that saving City Hall was one. That was a big one, and we did that in a very cost-effective way. Because it was in hideously poor condition. And
I can remember buckets in City Hall, like when it rained.
Yeah.
Buckets all over the place. Up and going down the stairs because everything was leaking.
I promised Tommy Curran, head custodian, that we were going to fix that up and put a nice shine on it, and she'll be good for another 50 years. And we did it.
Yes.
And, that was a big one to save that. But a couple of other ones that, you look at like the capital projects. There was the Gaslight District was one of the last ones I signed off on. But making that connection between the main Broad Street project and the Great River Bridge, we did that as a local effort by Pasquale's Pizza, and then the Route 10 intersection by Mestec. Those things, they took up a lot of public view, but things that never really get a lot of public view, but nonetheless are super important to the future of the city. In particular, there's 2. One of them was landing the new runway up at Barnes Airport in that new industrial park road. That road up there from a state grant allowed us to, and then the new runway, be successful with landing the Gulfstream expansion project, which will pay great dividends. So you couple that with the aviation maintenance program that's going on here at the university, or at the high school, plus the game and app design. We really re-energized Voc Tech Ed here in Westfield. We put a lot of extra resources into it, and it was electrifying and exciting. But there's one that you should keep an eye on that I think down the line will pay an enormous dividend to the city, because many parts of the state and the country at large grapple with this now. Early on in 2010, I was paid a visit by a person I'm still in contact with today. He was at the time the director of the Massachusetts Broadband Institute, MBI they call it. Okay. And MBI was responsible, as I would come to learn, for bringing high-speed fiber to 123 cities and towns in Western Mass. in one of the areas that it was going to come through was on Route 20 in Westfield, and Westfield was destined to have some landing spots for fiber hubs, and we did. I forget how many. It was dozens and dozens of spots, all the public buildings. So the issue became back then, what could this asset do for us here in town? Because, back then, even then, the internet was kind of in its infancy. But how is it that this great gift from, and that was a byproduct of the stimulus funding, that was an ERA project, what could we do with it? Well, all these years later, Westfield Gas and Electric, using their authority as a municipal light plant, is able to go to the city council, get a grant to build out 70% of the city, or get a bond order, and build out the city with high-speed fiber. So back in 2010, almost nobody that I'm aware of was streaming live internet TV shows.
Yes.
Now that's the rage. And back at the time, we only signed a 5-year deal with Comcast because I told them at that time, we don't know what the future of TV programming is, but I do know it's not the same as what it has been.
Right.
And they were like beside themselves. You got to sign a 10-year. I'm like, no, we're doing 5 years.
Yep.
And so down the line, I think that project and signing off so many city-owned facilities can be a hub to build from, and that's what's happening now. Will pay great dividends, because just like building in an industrial park, sewer, water, and gas and electric was critically important in the 60s and 70s and the 80s. That's the infrastructure you need to grow in the 21st century. So even though a lot of people aren't really familiar with it, they see what it is today, there were decisions that needed to be made back then. What building should be part of this? Do you want to have part of this? And it seemed like a big, powerful asset, but you couldn't really quantify.
Yeah,
what
you
that
couldn't
means.
sort of wrap your arms around.
I know now. It means $69 a month for my
there you go.
My internet access all in.
There you go.
I cut loose my Comcast bundle.
Yep,
so.
there you go. Well, I think it's interesting, and I've often said to the seniors, when you're in a position, I'm not sure if power is the right word, but there's just so much behind the scenes stuff going on.
Sure.
And when and in my small corner of the world over there at the senior center, when people will say to me, well, I think you should do it this way. Why do we have to do it that way? I usually say to people, there's almost always a reason of why we're doing something the way we're doing it. And I think when you're mayor, when you're, sort of at the top, there's so many moving parts. There's so much going on that people really aren't aware of.
That's true.
And when people say, well, when I hear the word just, that's when my wall goes up. I say, well, if you just did this or that, there's never a just.
Yeah.
When you're, sort of at the top trying to coordinate, facilitate, all of these moving pieces. It's just, it's very complicated. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that just they're just not aware of.
Even the simplest of projects can be, unbelievably problematic to get to. And I along the way, I can tell you that having Don Humison, Mike Knappich, and Rick Sullivan in Boston paid great dividends for this city. We were getting unbelievable amounts of grant money, whether it was park improvement and spray parks up at the Sadie Knox Playground, or rehabbing the Chapman Playground. And then, one of the things that I'm really proud of is the first grant for the Greenway came in all under Rick and Mike and Don's time down there. We were able to align this great alliance to harness, bringing back to Westfield all these great things that we are benefits of today.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I'd go down to Boston and other mayors would hear about all the money being spent in Westfield, and they're like, how did that all happen to you?
Mm-hmm.
What was it that you did that was magical? I said, we had a great friend in the governor's office. We had a great friend in that governor at the time, and we had a great friend in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and a great friend in the State House, and it all worked great for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember I had a pretty good relationship with Governor Patrick, and he came out one time at Westfield State, and he was under fire for a re-election campaign and whatnot. And I said, the Great River Bridge was getting close to wrapping up, and I said, well, geez, Governor, with any luck, maybe you'll be around here for the ribbon cutting of the bridge, And kind of like a dead calm went over the audience, like nobody could believe I'd take a shot at the governor during, but it was done in jest and humor. And so when he had the microphone, he gave me the same thing because I was up the next year. He goes, well, Mayor, with any luck, there's a lot of other things going on in Westfield maybe that you'll be part of.
There you go. Right back at you, my friend.
And what I tell people is that his role at the time was instrumental, I think, in landing the Gulfstream project, because we sat up at the airport with the General Dynamics leadership, with Governor Patrick and Rick Sullivan and myself, and we talked about what that deal should look like. And at the time, and I did not know this at the time, but when Governor Patrick worked for Coca-Cola is one of their largest corporate customers.
Okay.
So when he spoke to those folks, he knew them on a personal level. And his salesmanship of why you want to site this facility here in Westfield versus at the time they were looking at Appleton, Wisconsin, and a couple of other places was XYZ, and he had all the talking points nailed down, and it was unbelievable to be part of that. And you know what I would say is that Westfield, one of the things that I think we've always prided ourselves on over the years is good relations with our congressmen, our senators, and the folks down in Boston, and that continues today with Governor Baker's team. They're here a lot, and all the money that's being put into Westfield, whether it's downtown for redevelopment studies, Cabot Road prep studies, and there's a project that's close to being ready to start on Route 20 that'll help out the business that the Hanush families have invested on and be able to redo that. And that's all been done on, we kept that ball rolling.
Yes.
So what was really good about Westfield, all these big capital projects, is the secret or the plans for these things, as leaders would change, council members would change, mayors would change, state reps would change and whatnot, we kept handing the same plans off to successive generation of leaders.
Yeah.
So today you see that in town, but that's because the city, as a city and a body politic, never forgot that this is how you go Washington, D.C., in whether it's all the investment done at Barnes, the National Guard facility, which will continue to this day, to the runway, to the terminal building over the years, you name it, this city, its leadership over the years has done a great job helping to revitalize things. Now, some things people don't always agree with, but I'd always tell people that a lot of times what you're making with these projects is not something necessarily for today, but it's got to stand the test of time 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Well, it's really interesting, Dan. We're in the process, the COA board is in the process of working on a strategic plan. We're just in the infancy stage of that, because I feel like, I said to the board, I'm not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And, we need to have a plan. We need input from the seniors and so forth. But it's interesting because at the same time that we're just starting ours, the Athenaeum is doing theirs and the YMCA is doing theirs, and everyone's doing surveys and trying to get public input I'm on a couple of advisory committees on Bay State Noble Hospital. They're working on their community needs assessment and so forth. So I think that it's really important, and I think these are the opportunities for the residents to this is your opportunity. And I do remember when you were mayor and people were coming and saying, well, why are we doing this and why are we well, the plans for this were done 5-10 years ago. So where were you back then? This is, so that's what we keep telling people. And I keep saying to the city, this is your opportunity to talk about not necessarily what's going to happen next week, but what's going to happen next year and in 5 years and beyond that.
And that's critical to moving any community forward because it does take so long. I mean, if I would tell people the Gaslight District first contract was let out same thing at Western Avenue in Route 187 in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Great River Bridge was authorized in the late 80s, and it takes just so long on these big capital projects, and you have to stay at the table and be committed,
So let's transition, speaking of big capital projects and so forth.
Sure.
We have about 8 minutes or so left. So let's talk a little bit about your current position. You're town administrator for Yarmouth.
For the town of Yarmouth. Wonderful town, very similar in many aspects as Westfield. It's about 24,000 full-time citizens, but it explodes in the summertime to probably over 60,000.
Wow.
Very high population of elderly folks.
Is that kind of is that general on the
It's
Cape? I hear that from a
Cape.
lot of the directors out there.
No question.
Large percentage of older adults out there.
A big chunk of that, maybe it's 9,000 over the age of 60 or something like that. And it's a big second home community.
Right. Now, let's start with they don't have a mayor. You're a town administrator.
Yeah.
So explain the form of government in Yarmouth.
So government in Yarmouth is what's referred to as Board of Selectmen Open Town Meeting.
Okay.
So the Board of Selectmen's a 5-member board. They are voted in on staggered terms. And they set the general policy. So collectively, they're like the mayor. They're like a board of mayors.
Okay.
And I actually work for them directly.
Okay.
And I implement what their policy is or their decision making and administer the town. Now, not too many years ago, maybe 30 or so, 35 years ago, the selectmen 3-member board would run the town.
Ah.
And so they transitioned in the early 80s to a more professional full-time government. But town meeting occurs every spring, and that's when all your city council actions, zoning changes, bylaw, new bylaws or amendments and then appropriations for the budget occur, you have to line it all up and gather all these individual articles that you want to do into something that's referred to as the warrant. And then in Yarmouth over the last few years, we've had it on in the early first Saturday in May, and anybody who owns property can come into the town, and register for town meeting and sit through the meeting and hear the dialogue that goes on about supporting or not supporting any given article. Okay. And then when the vote's over, that's our marching.
Now, who's actually voting?
The town residents.
The residents are.
Yes.
So do they do it like by show of hands?
The moderator presides over the event, and like, if you're in favor of Article number 3, all in favor, they'd say aye.
Wow.
Those against, no. And if it's close, he'll call for a count.
Okay.
And this year, I think we had 3 counts.
Wow.
Where you actually send people in the audience to capture the count. So it's the oldest form of government in America. Yeah. It's a throwback to its colonial days. Yarmouth is a little bit older than Westfield's. 1639 it was founded, so they had their 375th birthday a few years back. But that's literally the way it was, back when the country first started,
So I'm going to ask you sort of the same question that I asked about Mayor of Westfield. So what have been some of your challenges in Yarmouth as town administrator?
So one of the significant challenges is we're in a regional 2-town school district, and in that particular case, the student population, much like it has been here, has been kind of declining, but the cost of educating kids on an individual basis has kind of been growing, and so an increasing burden on that cost is being shifted to the town of Yarmouth, which puts a lot of pressure on it. We've had 3 consecutive Prop 2.5 overrides to just finance the school system, So that continues to be it. The second one, I think, much like some of the conversation in Westfield, evolves around very close to the levy ceiling and an ability to grow anymore. And we're pretty built out in Yarmouth. It's a pretty mature community. There's not a lot of industry. Maybe 9% of our tax base is commercial style. It's all tourist generation. And a lot of the dialogue there is how do we transition to a more resilient full season economy?
Yeah.
And we don't have wastewater. I tell people when we were entertaining a casino on the north side, Hard Rock Casino we were in discussion preliminary with them. We had water, sewer here. I said, we never talked about if we had enough capacity to flush the toilets in Yarmouth.
Oh, wow.
Everything is about nitrogen loading from septic services that have endangered the embayments in the fresh water and the seawater. And we're like, our bill to build a sewer system in town is about $400 million. And that comes off a pretty needy population if we're successful.
Right.
How do you get there from here? But everybody recognizes the fact that you need to do this at some point, pull the trigger on it. But it's the financing piece that's very complicated because that population a lot of it's at the end of its career.
Right, exactly.
So those are some big challenges, but it's the town folks are great when they come and visit me, and if they have something to complain about, I don't necessarily see it on Facebook. They drop a nice handwritten letter off to me.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, and so we, I have office hours at the senior center. Some folks will come in and we'll talk about some of the challenges, and it's been a really good experience for me to participate in that form of government. I had one quick stop for a year and a few months at the state as a state manager,
right. That's what I forgot.
But I like to be back in the mix and build a team. I have a great team down in Yarmouth. Interestingly, Westfield has been struggling with some of its financial alignment of staff. We have a very solid crew. I have a town accountant that's a position that it's typically held by a CPA, but we have a finance director. I know the city council didn't quite get that over the line. But one of the things that I would encourage my colleagues here in Westfield to think about is the danger in Westfield is so much institutional knowledge goes out the door when a mayor goes.
Yes.
You need to actually have that finance director piece. And we tried to put those pieces together before I left, such that the operation of the city will continue to operate depending upon where the mayor is, because they know what to do inherently. And I'll hear some people in town say, well, the department heads run. That's not true. And if you want things to run and you want them to run effectively and efficiently, there's no replacing the person at the top to drive that agenda. So one of the things in Yarmouth that we struggle for is, how do you get bandwidth with so few local media options anymore? Is, I tell people down there, you want to know where the community's going? Listen to your mayor. You're going that way until the mayor stops saying he's going that way, or she stops saying, or when they're not running anymore. And that form of government galvanizes the community towards that goal, whatever it is that you're doing. So there's some, there was a good article in Commonwealth magazine, which does a lot of municipal articles about things about professionalization very quietly that's occurred over the last 20 years in town government. And it is astonishing to me what has occurred compared, because I have a chance to look at a couple of different forms here. In it's more business transactional in the town government because our appropriation gets done once.
Yep.
That's it. Like a prior year bill, wait till next town meeting to get it paid or get that invoice in June 30th.
Exactly.
So you've really got to be organized and have all your cylinders firing to make the town go. But it's been great. The town's been awesome to be part of, and like I said, it's a great place to spend summers on. And the off season's a little bit challenging for sure. There's between the economy and social situations down there being what they are. I tell people one of the nice things about Westfield was we took care of our own through all those storms. We had the Carson Center, we had the college, we have a robust school system. Any need you needed, the senior center. How many times did I have to call you during these disasters to help seniors relocate? You know, but out there, it's sparsely populated. We rely on the county government for a lot of things, and it's challenging. And if you have a couple of significant natural disasters, it's a challenge.
Well, it is interesting, and just to kind of wrap things up, but I think that, and I've said it all along, Westfield has, one of the reasons I love working in the city is that there are so many resources, and there are so many people, I've been here now 13 years, and, you kind of know who to call, who to reach out to for what, there's that networking thing. It's like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble here. I'm going to call, Bill Parks over here. I'm going to call, the college president over here. I'm going to call Andrea Allard at the Y. There, you just know what to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. So. I remember somebody coming to see me early on. She was a woman with a couple of kids recently evicted from her apartment. It was like 4:45 on a Friday. It's like, well, who's going to help you at 4:45 on a Friday, right? And I picked up one phone call to Gail Agassi, Gail from
Gail from the Salvation Army.
I got somebody here. She sent them down. We'll take care of it until we get her connected with state aid.
And it was so funny. I was just at a meeting with the mayor and some of the department heads last week, and Joe. I know Pete's probably waving his arms around. Joe Rouse from the health department, we were joking around because it was like all of the crises seemed to happen on Friday after like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We are so, like Joe and I are so used to that. And, we had, Pat Aglaw from the fire department and, Ben Warren is the new prevention officer. It's like, yep, if it's going to happen, it's going to be Friday afternoon. So Dan Knappich, I want to thank you. So this 2 hours flew by. I didn't even do any announcements. And it was just so much fun to do this anniversary edition, 5-year anniversary edition of Wake Up Wednesday.
Thank you for inviting me in. This has been great to catch up and be part of your Wake Up Wednesday programming.
Our celebration.
Yeah.
Thanks
I
so
say we
much.
dust off his old theme and play that going out.
There you go.
Thanks,
I love
Pete.
it, Pete.
Good seeing you guys.